you need to tell her that that's disgusting. And boom, and I'm like thinking to myself, that's not gonna work. Like
And that's the
saying,
thing. What works? What
yeah,
works? If
yeah, like
shame
saying like,
works, I will, yes.
and I guess
If
that's
that's
what
what
I'm wondering, like,
succeeded.
because it depends on then what do you mean by like work? Like if I say like that's disgusting and boom, 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 maybe the person might stop dating their cousin, but it's not gonna stop them from being attracted to their cousin or to or like they're just gonna stop whatever behavior they're doing, or they're just gonna
Yeah.
stop talking to you about it. Welcome to the Knife Show, where we dissect the human psyche and society. My name is Denzel Mensa. I'm an ENFJ.
And my name is Joyce Ming, and I'm an INFJ. And today we're going to talk about how everything is connected. So this conversation was inspired by Lilette, and she commented on how if we all operated as if we were taking care of each other, like starting with this example of homeless people, I'll let you actually share it because you're way better at explaining this, and how society would be if we acknowledged that everyone was connected. And I thought it was an interesting thought to explore. So I'll pass it off to you.
Shoot. Now I'm gonna have to remember what I said.
Oh yeah, so this is like a exercise in polar SI. You're like,
Yeah.
No. I think the gist of it was when you're passing through a city and we're looking at the people around us, right? And someone is without a home, that reaction would be different. Let's say if that person, like you knew that person for one, and then also if the city wasn't so big, let's imagine like village setting where everyone knows each other and you either see the progression or like you're connected in a certain way. I think when we're in these big cities or suburbs where we have the privilege or we're afforded to be disconnected from each other is when these kinds of disconnected thoughts happen. But it's a very real thing that in a smaller setting, we become connected because we have some kind of context to go off of, whether it's, oh, this person in my family, let's say, is homeless. You might think, how does this reflect on me? We all came from the same place. How does this reflect on me? So the smaller our ecosystem, like our social ecosystem gets, the more relevant it becomes, but the bigger it gets. There's this point where it stretches almost like if you're taking a piece of putty and stretching it, there's this breaking point. Where is that breaking point? And that's really what I'm interested in is when do we stop feeling about other people like that in those kind of circumstances? It's really interesting because I will preface it's like, okay, what kind of thought is this, right? Especially coming from an ENTJ. I think it's really relevant to me specifically because like as like a first generation immigrant, right? So my mom came over from the Philippines and then that having that kind of background, I feel like, you kind of realize how if that decision wasn't made for you before you were even born, you wouldn't even be where you are. So it's kind of like a topic that's like personal to me that I care about. But yeah, that's really the context here.
Nice. Yeah. I remember that when you brought that up, I was actually thinking about myself and like how that is relatable. And I remember that one of the things that I had stated was I do believe that everybody is connected. It's like the more that something affects you as a person, then the more that you're going to try to do something to about it. So even like for example, a lot of FE users, they a lot of times like the reason why they will try to dissolve conflict and everything, and is because that conflict they're also absorbing it, and so it's like harming them as well. It's affecting them on top of that. So it's kind of like, as long as there's tension here, even if I'm not involved, then I'm still feeling it, and it's uncomfortable. And so as soon as I dissolve that, then not only do the people involved get free from that discomfort, but I'm also freeing myself from that discomfort. So I have to solve that problem, because that is my problem. That's why I guess a lot of FE users, sometimes it can be like, oh, like they're meddling, like it's somebody else's business. But it's like, well, it's affecting me too. And so when you see, like, the homeless people like out there and everything like that, it's like you're connected in a way to humanity, to the people around you. In that sense, you feel for them. And I know for me especially, having like FESE as my main mode, the way that I see that, it comes out in many ways. But one of the ways is that it's kind of like a leaping to any interpersonal fire. So you see an interpersonal fire here, it's an instinctual leap to that. You see another interpersonal fire, you instinctually leap to that. Somebody needs help over here, oh, you leap to that. Whereas, like, when you get the NI development, then you hold back a little bit. It's like, wait, there's a lot of different fires around here. I only have so much water in this hose. Which fire is quote unquote most important, or am I most responsible for, or is the smartest one to actually put out and won't come right back? Where can I find the source? Like, let me take a few moments, instead of like leaping to put out the fire, let me think a little bit more long term. Like, okay, where is the fire? Where are the fires coming from? What is a more effective way to even put out the fire? How can I decide which fires to be able to put out? In what order should I actually put out these fires? Is this even my responsibility? Should I find a way to even like detach from it? Because at the end of the day, I think, especially as an ENFJ, one of the biggest things that I had to learn was like, not my monkey, not my circus. So it's kind of, I think that's how the saying goes. So it's pretty much like an ENFJ who learns to be like, you know what, that's not my problem. It sounds cold, but it's actually because it almost balances that impetus to jump and try to help every single person around you, to the point where you're going to your own detriment. So even an ENFJ who's like, yeah, that's not my problem. Again, I'm saying that in a dramatic sense, but you still know that it's your problem. It's just that now you're tempering it. It's like, okay, wait, if something happens here, I'm not fully responsible. So I've had lots of friends, even clients, who've dealt with like dark thoughts and things of that nature. Trigger warning, but like even like self-harm and like suicide and stuff like that. And sometimes, like, I remember like back my freshman year of college, I used to like get really worried. Like I had literally like over 30 different people like talking to me at the same time, like on my phone. It was to the point where like my like Jamila, who was my girlfriend at the time, like she was like, man, you're just like always on your phone, like can't even be present. And it was because like I always felt like if I didn't check every message, if I didn't check my phone every now and then, I was like the only person in all of these people's lives who was keeping them between living a happy life and like offing themselves in some way or something like that. And it's like, how'd I end up in that position? I kind of know, yes, but like it's like, if not me, then who else? But then again, that goes back to the whole God complex of like, you can't save everybody. And it would get to the point where it's like, if somebody did do something, then I would feel like it's my fault, I'm responsible. And we see that a lot with like anime characters who's like, it's my fault, it was all on me. And it's like, you have to learn, no, it's not. Like, stop putting everything on yourself. But doesn't mean like, you go to the other extreme where there are people in the world who really, they don't they don't care at all. And so there's like, if for example, the people who might be watching, like if you're somebody who literally never cared about homeless people, well then this is probably not advice for you. Like, don't take, you probably should go the other direction, because what we're looking for is like balance. But at the end of the day, essentially what I'm trying to say is like I definitely relate to what Lilette said. And it's interesting to me to like observe myself and see how much I had that impetus to jump in and just help like at any point. And the thing is that I had to conclude was like, if we're using homeless people for an example, I, as of right now in this time of life, do not have the means to be able to help them consistently, if almost at all. And so I have to trust that what I am doing in the world, my karmic obligation is, to facilitate conversations like this, to be able to bring awareness and attention to certain things, to be able to be an embodiment of love in whichever way that I can. And hopefully, because I have this belief that everybody is connected, then in me speaking, in me being able to coach people, and me being able to help the people that come to me, I'm probably helping those who actually do have the resources to be able to be like, hey, maybe I should care for homeless people, especially since I have this in abundance, and then they might be able to do that. So then it's almost like my inadvertent way of playing my part to help them, but it's just a longer way and it's less direct, but it's more effective. So yeah, like knowing how to like play your part in the society, in the fabric that I'm moving into, and ultimately fulfilling my purpose, and knowing like, okay, this is, if society is a cog in the machine, then what role do I play? And how can I play my role to the best of my ability, which being an FE Dom plus social dominant and a social 9 at that, it's like, that's like the biggest thing. Like, what is my role and how can I play to the best of my ability? And I think that as long as we all learn to do that, and me being the type of person I am, I help other people to fulfill their part, then they're now able to also do their part, which then becomes this like domino thing, where everyone is now, we will have the people who are caring for homeless people, but then we'll also have the people who are caring for the dolphins, and we're also having the people who care for like orphans, and people who are like, everybody, if they're walking in their purpose, then uh they're going to be handling the part of society, the part of our world that they are destined to handle.
And it seems like this playing your part and that we're all cogs in a bigger machine, it almost seems like there's a human desire to be a vital cog in some way to someone or to something in order to feel a sense of belongingness or even value or usefulness to something greater than yourself or to others. And it actually helps you with knowing what can actually like so what I'm actually taking from it is that there's this element of we're connected in this bigger fabric of things, and it actually helps us to know our role because that actually helps us with establishing some sort of purpose that takes us away from a sense of nihilism that we might get if we don't feel like we're a part of a cog of the greater fabric of society. There's a principle in physics that talks about everything is connected to everything else. And so nothing operates in isolation. And so you could see this with human beings too, that none of us operate in isolation and none of us understand ourselves in isolation. And so we need other people to understand what role we play and who we are. And when we don't actually have that reflected back to us in society or by our parents or by our friends, that we don't know our strengths, we don't know our experiences as well without a mirror. And so, in a way, we both play an active role of helping people and putting out fires, as Denzel put it, and we also play a more passive role of being a mirror to others to help them see society more clearly or themselves more clearly. And it's pretty interesting. You talked about, Denzel, how there's this element of if you're always putting out every fire that's in front of you, you don't learn to prioritize. And then you only have so much water, so much in a day. And so it's kind of like with every choice, there's a potential of you're helping someone and also accidentally throwing someone under the bus too if you don't manage your energy well. And so, like, and what I mean by that is we neglect other priorities by taking care of other priorities. And so in a way, we learn as we grow older to balance ourselves out, whatever direction that is. I know that I can sometimes have people pleasing tendencies, and I know INTPs who think the solution to my problem is, oh, Joyce, you're just meeting people too much of the way there. Like, basically, they say that you're putting too much effort into your relationships. So the solution to your problem is just to dismiss people. And I'm like, all right, INTP, that's, you know, that's an interesting solution, but it's like it's how they would go about the situation. So I'm wondering how people can put out less fires while still being themselves. Like, how do you tell an FE Dom to still they can still be an FE Dom while not putting out fires and not feeling like they have to compromise themselves in a way?
Yeah, which is huge because, for me, I never stopped putting out fires, which is everything's very like ironic here because so people already know like I wear this necklace all the time. It's from a series of unfortunate events, the Lemony Snicket books. So it's the eye tattoo, but then also like the VFD. So it's like an I, but it's also like a VFD, and VFD is an acronym that stands for many different things. It's kind of like a secret code because it's a secret organization. And one of the things that they say to explain who they are is that they put out both literal and figurative fires. So that just further goes along with the whole thing of like, yeah, like I'm always putting out fires. I focus on the figurative ones. But yeah, I've never stopped putting them out. It's just that instead of leaping to every single fire that I see now, I can put my phone on do not disturb now. And I gauge where to keep my attention. Like there's a difference between the Flash, who doesn't really try to save the world often. He's mainly focused on Star City. You know, Batman, he's focused on Gotham City. Like Superman, he's Superman. So as far as I know, he does try to save the world, but that's different. But like knowing like your place, like they're still doing what they can, but Flash is like, hey, I got Star City, Batman got Gotham City, Arrow got, I forgot where the Green Arrows, like, oh my, I'm like off on these things, but it's like if everybody's playing their part, then we're all doing well. It's kind of the same thing. Like even when you're playing basketball, you're assigned to one person to guard. Now, if somebody else is coming by you, then yeah, you can reach out real quick to like get the ball from them. But if your man scores, everybody's gonna look at you like, yo, whose man is that? Because you needed to be guarding that person. So if everybody, like put a question in the private chat over there, I think was like a note for herself saying like, does walking in your purpose solve the problem? In my opinion, absolutely. Once you discover what your purpose is, once you discover what your karmic obligation is, then you're like, oh, okay, as long as I'm doing this, as long as I'm staying in my lane and doing what it is that I was called to do, you're not going to topple over and do more, like too much, and you're not going to do too little either. You're doing exactly what you need to. You're setting out the ripples to the exact people, and the things that you're unable to tap into, you can give yourself grace for, because it's kind of like you can't get mad in a basketball game if one of your teammates let their man score. That's not your man. You weren't supposed to be guarding that person. That was that person's responsibility. Now, if they had the ball and you had a very great opportunity to block them and you didn't, you could be like, dang, that kind of came right my way. But at the end of the day, like you can't guard everybody on the team. And so that's why it's also really good to know, like, hey, you are part of a bigger society. The better of a player that I can be on the basketball court, then the better I'll be able to guard my man. I'll be able to make my shots. But then also, if I'm able to help everybody else on my team to become a more better basketball player, then they'll be able to better guard their man. Next thing you know, we're not losing games. We are all like working together in unison. We know each other's strengths and weaknesses. We're able to like handle the things that we need to handle. But there's a difference between guarding your man and moving to somebody else's, like if they come by or whatever like that, and you know that you can handle that situation, versus everywhere the ball goes, then you're running and chasing the ball. You know what I'm saying? That's not a very effective way to do it. You're going to get very exhausted. Next thing you know, you're tired before the end of the game, and you can't guard anybody because you've already used up all of your energy. If you were just guarding your one person, wouldn't have happened, especially if you can get everybody else to be able to guard their one person. So it's really karmic responsibility. That's the term. I was like, karmic obligation. I think that's like a little bit different because I don't really like to think of it as like like you're obligated to it. I think it's kind of like a calling. Like it's like I feel like there's something a little bit different from like responsibility and obligation. But yeah, like you know, you pick up that karmic responsibility, you become aware of that purpose, and you know, it just so happens that part of my purpose is to ignite other people's awakening of their own karmic responsibilities as well. So it's like, hey, part of my purpose is to help each of you understand what your purpose is. And if I can help each of you understand what your purpose is as a life coach and everything, I'm doing my purpose so that y'all can go out and do your purpose to become an actual firefighter, or to become somebody who helps the homeless, or to go do this or to go do that. But yeah, if you're not walking in your purpose, then yeah, you're not really solving the problem.
Yeah, and in a way, you can tell if something is your karmic responsibility when you feel like you're the channel for it. So people sometimes feel like something just happens to them and they're speaking on behalf of something larger than themselves. They're more of a conduit to this calling. And so that's one of the ways you can tell if your karmic responsibility is activated in some way. Because you stop seeing it as you're the egoic person who's making the things, that you're actually, there's something coursing through you in a way.
I like that, yeah, where it's kind of from this higher power that you're tapping into, this higher source that you're tapping into. And one of the things that I was going to ask is, how do you tell if it's your thing, right? Your purpose. And then also, just side note too, I think this will really speak to the FI users out there, right? Because not to say that we don't like have that kind of feeling of I want to help everybody, but there is this part of me that kind of felt, I guess, a sense of satisfaction of like, okay, yeah, so I can still put in that work to optimize the self, and because doing so means you have this specific, like the assumption here is that you have this specific calling that's unique to you, and fulfilling that is the answer, is the solution. So I think that really speaks to FI users as well. Um, and that's kind of where FI and FE folks can garner that understanding. We can come together and say, okay, so I see I see where what you're doing is going to help other people too, you know? And it's interesting because it can kind of border selfishness, right? Where it's like, oh no, I just want to, there is that moment where, oh, I just want to work on myself. I just want to work on myself. And you might be able to tell that no, actually, you just don't want to care about anyone else but yourself. That's a whole different thing. But I think it'll really speak to the FI users and bring FI and FE together. The assumption that by fulfilling that purpose, we are accomplishing this task at hand, right? This task to kind of elevate society as a whole kind of makes sense, right? I wanted to introduce an alternative, and it's kind of attached to a story. So the story is about, there's 100 balloons and there's 100 students. Actually, let's up the ante. There's 1,000 balloons and there's 1,000 students. Okay, and they're all in this room, and the teacher says, in each balloon there's a name. You find your name amongst all these balloons. So the students first approach the task going to find their names only, and most of them didn't find it. So they reset the scenario, and so the teacher said, okay, this time I want you to go out, and when you pick up a balloon and you find that it's not your name, find the person it belongs to. And the exercise was done in 2 minutes. So that's an alternative to what we're talking about, right? Because there's this optimization within the unit, a unit being a person in the grand scheme of society. And if we're focusing on optimizing the self, so turning inward, that's a, honestly necessary part of this whole thing, because you can't really help people if you're injured or like having your own things going on. But how about the opposite way? Focusing on finding other people's names. Would that actually be a faster way than what we're proposing?
Yeah, by collaborating, we can reach a higher whole. Yeah, there's actually a lot of games based off of that too. It's like each person has a different part of the puzzle. And if your goal is to actually form as much of the puzzle as you would like, it's actually to get everyone's parts together so that you can connect each other's puzzle pieces to each other's rather than trying to build the most with your own pieces. But you'll only get so far. Then given if you had everyone else's puzzle pieces, then you would be able to put the whole picture together. And so sometimes we have the vital information that could actually contribute to someone else's well-being in a way. To just go
Yeah,
off of your metaphor, Lilette.
that's exactly it. Like, what if on your journey of finding your purpose, you find someone else's purpose? Are you morally obligated to go seek out that person, make sure that they're connected with that purpose? Like if the objective is to elevate society, if that's the faster way to elevate society, does that mean you're then obligated to do that from time to time? Maybe not every time, but
Yeah, I wouldn't say that anybody's necessarily obligated for anything really, but uh it is definitely recommended for sure. Like I think that it's advisable to do that because for me I always think in terms like that. Like that's me once again continuing to play my part, you know. If somebody else finds something of mine, I would want them to also bring that to me. Now, sometimes people are running away from that balloon. That's another thing. It's like they might know that it's out there. They might know even what it is. They might have even already ran into it and they said, and they threw it back out there, hoping like, hey, come float
it's
back
true.
to me again in like 5 years. So they might be upset if you bring that balloon back to them. But, you know, I think that as long as again, like you're kind of like doing your part, then yeah, that is good because you never know. Maybe they are somebody who's been like looking all over and they weren't able to find it. And then it's like, yo, actually, have you checked here? Like, or hey, I found this for you. And it's like, whoa, like I had no idea. Like, and it's like, really? Like, it's been right here. It's like, well, I mean, my mom, she always like told me that I'm just an average painter and like I'm not really like gonna actually become big with this, and it's not really whatever. And it's like, interesting. Well, your painting, like literally just from that simple painting, it really reminded me of the home that I grew up in, and that brought a lot of like healing for me in this way, and boom, 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 boom. And it's like, really? It's like, yeah. So as a matter of fact, like I wonder how many more other people, if they were to see some of your artwork, how much healing it could do for them. Don't sleep on it. Next thing you know, like now they found their purpose. They have more of a motivation to go out there and paint, even though they felt like it was nothing. It was just painting, you know. So I think that sometimes, it is something that's good, but sometimes it's also a lot of pressure for certain people. But the least that you can do is like present it back to them. If they toss it away, if they kick it away, that's on them. But I do think that like it is recommended and advisable, even if it's not obligation to try that.
It's so interesting. I love that you pointed that out, Denzel. I love that you pointed that out, right? Because the obligated versus recommended, I was just kind of imagining, well, wait, why the heck did I say obligated, right? But actually, like if we look back, maybe 50, 100, 1,000 years, I'm gonna just keep on using 1,000. What were things that weren't obligated then, but are obligations now? because we have discovered as a whole of society that cannibalism is probably not the right thing. So, so actually, should it be obligated? Is my real question. Is like, I think the stage of society we're at right now is it's recommended, especially since we are just coming into understanding how what we're thinking, how how our thoughts can dictate a lot of things. So mental health, right? Should it be obligated? Should it eventually, like, I know that's not feasible right now, right? But should it eventually be the norm?
Yeah. It's like how people go for regular dental checkups or we wash our hands after going to the washroom. It's mental hygiene. So we'd be grossed out if people were to go to the washroom or to like never wash their hands in their whole life, right? We'd be like, dude, wash, like take a shower or something. But we don't do that with our emotional or mental well-being in life. We don't have hygiene practices for that. And I think one day it could be the norm depending on where society chooses to care, like if society chooses to care about that.
Yeah, I think that y'all bring up good points. I guess for me, this is just a personal thing. I've always been, I'm like thinking about myself. I'm thinking about it and analyzing why I'm like, to that obligation thing. It's like, I have no problem for myself being obligated to certain things because to me, I see it as like, that's how I move. Like, I feel like I'm obligated to this, I'm obligated to that, boom, boom, boom. But with other people, I feel uncomfortable making them feel like they're obligated to something. And the way that I've always operated is I always think that if I can make something make sense to a person, then they will do it on their own. So it's like, sure, I'm not gonna pressure you by making you be like, no, this is your job. This is your obligation kind of thing. I'm not saying that's what you guys are doing either. But I just always feel like if I present like, well, you know, it really helps. I'd really highly recommend and advise that you wash your hands after you use the bathroom because a lot of bacteria ends up on there. I even highly recommend that you wash your phone every now and then. Like me, I personally, I wipe down my phone with like a Clorox wipe every like week because I'll go to the gym and then I'll use it. And a lot of people are touching those things, stuff like that. So it's like I try to make sure I'm keeping it clean, and then it keeps me from being sick as frequently and stuff like that. And it just really helps a lot. If you think about like all the things that you touched and now like you're touching your food and other people and you're getting them sick and stuff like that, it doesn't really seem right. So I'd highly recommend like, washing your hands after you get out of the bathroom and stuff like that for these reasons. But, not forced. If you put down all of that math and all of that reasoning, a rational person, I would like to think about, I guess I should do that. It's beneficial to me and it also helps other people. And then they can decide on their own. And I guess this is another thing. But this is a whole other can of worms, so I won't really open it. But I made a video a few years ago and I pretty much stated that in my opinion, as of this time of life right now, I really don't believe that there is a place for shame. I don't believe in shame. I don't like shame because if you shame people for having certain opinions, if you shame people for, just doing certain things, then they will still continue to hold those opinions. They're just going to hide them from you, you know. But if you actually allow them to, express that opinion or whatever, and then you have the patience to actually understand it so that you can pick it apart from the inside, and then they can be like, oh, now the opinion has been disassembled, and then they can come to their own conclusion. So for me, like there are certain opinions even that I know, like especially as an FE dominant, that oh, society believes this. And if I don't want to get canceled, if I don't want to get crucified, I need to get on board with that. But internally, I'm like, but I don't want to just buy into this just because society is saying that we are buying into this and boom, 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 boom. Like, I want to come to that conclusion on my own. I don't want to people please and be like, I'm trying to think of an example that I don't really believe in so that I don't get canceled, but like, well, yeah, like let's say like murder. Like I don't want to just say like, oh, well, like obviously like I do believe that murder is wrong in most situations. Um but yeah, like I don't want to just say like, yeah, no, murder is bad just because I know that if I didn't say that murder is bad, then society's going to shame me and call me a bad person and cancel me and all of that. I want to come to that conclusion on my own. So it's like, yeah, I think that murder is bad. And I came to that not because I was afraid of being canceled or I'm trying to people please or anything like that. But I went into my own mind, I did my own math, and I came to my own conclusion that yeah, murder is bad. Oh yeah, this is right, this is wrong. So I guess that's why sometimes I feel like when it comes to like obligation or some sort of like shame or like force, because I want everybody to come to their own conclusions on their own. And the best that I can do is really understand them and then present my own math. And if I present my math and it makes enough sense to them, then hopefully they'll adopt it just as I try to do if they're a reasonable person. And if they're not a reasonable person, well then I guess that's where I'm like I just draw the line like, hey, I guess this isn't my responsibility. But I'm also aware that hey, maybe that's why there are other people in the world who will be like I don't know if y'all know that Woody meme where it's like, but I'm not a hater, and then he's like pulling the person back and he's like, don't worry, I am. And it's like, so I'm not somebody who's gonna shame people and like force them, and somebody else might be like, don't worry, Denzel, you've done enough work here, I'm about to shame this person.
I was about
Like,
to say Denzel. I was like, you know what? Actually, I think, there's a method to the madness, right? Where like we need a lot of different kinds of approaches, right? And also it's not a one size fits all.
mm,
I was thinking about just a personal experience, right? Where I'm not really great at what you do, right, Denzel, and probably Joyce too, where you're kind of you're aiding them in finding that journey for themselves, you know. Whereas I feel like I'm more apt to kind of basically like hands-off approach, right? Until the very last moment where it's like, okay, you're about to go off a cliff, so let me help you here. And when I say let me help you, let me tell you. And we're gonna hard correct because you're gonna thank me later. You're gonna hate me now, but you're gonna thank me later.
mm,
And I feel like that's and perhaps maybe I'm still very young. My opinion is probably gonna change about this and about my approach. And I hope it does, but I think for those of us shoulder shakers out there, I'm gonna call us the shoulder shakers, where
I love
we're
the
the person
alliteration.
where it's like nothing has worked up until this point. Now is time. Now is optimal for the shoulder shake, where you grab someone and you shake them so hard that they realize that they probably should not commit murder right at this moment. Yeah, no, I like it. I like it. I think I can see the value in both, right? And that's the coolest part about this show, right? Is I think that it takes us like, okay, yeah, I see where you're going there, and I see where I'm going here. And then,
Mm,
it's not this like ride or die, which one is better, but it's actually just seeing where everything fits. So,
yeah, yeah,
again, like seeing the where is everything connected. So
yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
you need actually most times you're gonna need that journey. People do need to figure things out themselves. And thank goodness there's people out there to be very patient about that process.
Mm.
And then you need the shoulder shakers when all has failed and someone needs to smack some sense into them so that they remember this
Right.
time, which I will speak to SE users out there. I know we don't remember too much, and we need that. We need the shoulder shake. In fact, I feel like, it's really, really helpful for those who kind of wait for that moment sometimes.
But do you
So
consider shoulder shake shaming? Goodness, try to say that 3 times fast. Shoulder shake shaming?
I consider, and I'm gonna tell another story. I consider it pulling your leg, right? So,
Yeah.
in the context of this story, so I was off the coast of or I was in the Gulf, right? And we were um, swimming around, snorkeling, looking for turtles. And I had my camera out and I was just going on my merry way, just amazed that I was just in water, period. That was so blue and pretty. Um, so I didn't notice the turtle like right behind me. Right? Because the water just kind of takes you wherever it wants. And so if
Mhm.
all of a sudden you're facing this direction, you're like, oh, okay, all right, I can vibe with this. We had someone with us, tour guide, let's say, and he ended up pulling my leg, and I did a 180, and then all of a sudden, and you can hear on my little camera recording underwater, I'm like, oh, as then now the turtle's right in front of me. So I see a proper shoulder shake is just a leg pull where it's
Yeah.
like, hey, it could be jarring, but it's so results based that all is forgiven.
Which that I
Not
can
even
I'm on
thinking
board with.
about. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm on
exactly.
board with that. It's the
Yeah.
shaming that's like, I knew somebody who was, like, sleeping with and dating their cousin and everything like that. And, the cousin also happened to be an ex-con and just and doing a lot of dastardly things to this person because I was, like, talking to this person, I was, like, really, like, aiding them. They were one of the fires that I was, like, I guess, dealing with. Then one of my friends noticed how it was taking a little bit of a toll on me because I was trying to really make decisions for this person. I'd warned this person in advance and all that about, getting involved with this person, not just because it's their
Mhm.
cousin, but like because like
For many
ex-con or
myriad of
yeah, like there's a
reasons.
lot of stuff that's going on with this.
Yep.
But when my friend had noticed, then he was like, all he really could say is like, that's disgusting. Like that's their cousin. They like there's so many, like you need to tell her that that's disgusting. And boom, and I'm like thinking to myself, that's not gonna work. Like
And that's the
saying,
thing. What works? What
yeah,
works?
yeah,
If
like
shame
saying like,
works, I will, yes.
and I guess
If
that's
that's
what
what
I'm
you
wondering, like,
see it as.
because it depends on then what do you mean by like work? Like if I say like that's disgusting and boom, 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 maybe the person might stop dating their cousin, but it's not gonna stop them from being attracted to their cousin or to or like they're just gonna stop whatever behavior they're doing, or they're just gonna
Yeah.
stop talking to you about it. If you're
Right, right,
talking
right.
to
Yeah.
your gay child about like that is absolutely disgusting homosexuality, boom, 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 it doesn't make them be like, oh, never mind, I'm just gonna stop being gay. Like they're gonna just hide from you
I
whatever
mean,
they're
those
doing.
specific comments are very one-sided. It's almost like an expulsion of someone's emotional disgust,
Yeah,
which is received as shame by the other person. So
right,
I don't actually
exactly,
think that's even strategic whatsoever. There's no
exactly.
element of thinking through what you're saying,
Hmm.
and how it's gonna impact the person in the long term.
Yeah,
I would say that
long
if
term,
you
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so, like, what works? I would say whatever works in the long term, and sometimes short term is needed, but I typically find that, um, I mean, I just don't prefer looking at it in that way, right? Like, I'd much rather sit back and carefully pick, like, what is really gonna work, and you know what? If shame does work in whatever dosage, right? Whether it's, like, just one time shame bomb or just, like, little drip feed of shame,
Mhm.
um, to, let's say, like, stop someone from bullying or hurting other people, especially when it has to do with, like, they are actively hurting other people. I think
Mhm.
shame is appropriate. In fact, I put a comment in private chat, there's some people at the top that do not have anyone above them to make them feel shame, because shame is like you feel beneath, right? I feel like
Mhm.
it's like a feeling where you're feeling like, "Ooh, I don't want anyone to look at me right now, because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do or what have you." Um, but if there's no one to make you feel shame, which like often you need something that you hold above yourself, some kind of like um uh, what's it called? Voice that says that kind of like evaluates you, you know. That's kind of
Mhm.
like where the source of the shame is coming from. If you don't have any, if you put yourself at the thought or at the top, you know, socially that's problematic inherently. There's not a whole lot of people who fit that bill, you know, but I think that's an instance where there's a lack of shame, like a
Yeah.
severe deficiency in it that is not good for a lot of people. So,
So what I'm hearing here is that what causes real change is either one of two things: inspiration, so a person feels inspired from inside themselves to change, like what Denzel was mentioning, or necessity. So you notice that you need a shoulder shake, and that provides you to notice the urgency and the necessity of the situation, that you really have to change. And I'm also hearing like the differentiation between healthy shame and toxic shame. And so, like, I'll give the example of someone who might like an obligation is an ESTJ. So I'm literally writing an ESTJ book right now, and the ESTJs are like, Joyce, please obligate us. That's their like magic word, because they want to know that it's important and a responsibility, so that they'll prioritize it. And sometimes obligation is a word used to describe, you know, the long-term impact of your decision. And so someone's telling you a decision that if you take it, it's an obligation because you know the clarity of the implication that will follow it. So obligation, it can cause a slight, I I guess it can be shameful for some people to have an obligation, and for some people it can feel like a sense of clear role. It's like, now that I have an obligation, it actually defines a level of clarity of as to what I'm supposed to do, and it leaves no ambiguity for me to stall. And that for people, uh, some people hate the need of more options, or like it's almost by not giving them an obligation, you're giving them too much choice, and that actually paralyzes them. Whereas for other people, shame paralyzes them. It's like, oh, I feel like I'm inherently defective, so this crippling shame is preventing me from doing the thing. And so that's very unhealthy. Some people can experience shame on more of a lighter level. You could even maybe equate it to more, it's more guilt, that they feel bad for doing the action, and they might feel bad as a person for even considering have done that thing, but it actually makes them think more about the decision. And it goes back to Denzel's point that ultimately you want people to think through the thing itself. And I feel like even when Lilette is like, let's say, nudged by other people during the scuba thing or the turtle example, that you don't let it cripple you. It actually provokes you to think more. And you're like, why did that person tell me to move that way? Oh, it's because of the turtle. And so now you've actually thought through the process in hindsight. So it's still doing Denzel's like, yo, you have to think through it to fully believe in it. But some people have more tough skin, or they can actually be nudged a little and then they can think it through, and that still works for them. And some people need to think it through beforehand to really buy into it. And so like Denzel's really talking about like the beforehand people. Like some people really need to know in like before even giving a behavioral adjustment that, hey, it's okay, like here are my thought process behind it. Because some people are need a little bit more of a gentle touch, which is maybe where me and Denzel as Enneagram 9s can excel in this gentle clarity given to other people. Like, I wonder if NFJs really resonate with the karmic responsibility element of helping others find their karmic responsibility. Because, like, for me, I've always seen myself as a coach. I desire to help people with finding their divine design, which is another way of saying karmic responsibility, and like helping them have more clarity behind their thought process for it, so that they can go through with it without that doubt or something crippling them in the way. It's kind of like this, like NFJs believe that there's a river of knowledge in everyone, and that they're just stones in the way of you clearing that river of knowledge. But if you actually are able to help them clear those stones, the the river of knowledge will actually help them with arriving at the conclusion themselves too, with your help of helping their thinking. It's like, hey, I'm going to give you direction as to the information and arguments. And I believe that if your water is clear enough, you have that inner wisdom within you too that will know right from wrong, and it's, or even right or wrong is a judgment. Like you will find what your version of that is, or what makes sense to you. And so you can move from a place of sustainability rather than like trying to follow someone else's karmic responsibility and then failing at that, and then gaining more shame from doing something that ultimately wasn't suited for you. Like NFJs know that it's most sustainable to get people to do things that actually match them. So they're like, it just makes sense in the long term to correct their thinking almost. It seems
That's
like.
so interesting. I like that visual example you gave with the stones, right? It kind of reminds me of just electron potential, right? Where, okay, there's not a whole clear connection here, but I'll explain. So, in order to move electron to a higher level, you need a certain amount of energy. And if that energy threshold isn't met, then it does not move on to the next level. So, same thing with stones, right? With physics, there's a certain amount of force that you need to get it through. And that's where 100% agree with like unblocking the stones, right? Um, some people have smaller stones. And then some people have just a full on dam that they've created themselves. And in those instances, it's almost as if you kind of need to bulldoze right through it, because they won't remove it themselves. In fact, they don't see it as a blockage at all. They prefer it that way. And I think we talked about this a little bit before, where there's some people who actually just want to take the balloon and just throw it back out. They're like, no, I know this one has my name in it, but come again, maybe next time. And they'll do this over and over and over and over again in their lives. And they're hurting a lot of people in the process. They're not finding their um, karmic response, or they're denying their karmic responsibility. And I think that's where it's like the approaches come together for the same goal of, okay, well, someone has to knock it down. Someone has to knock it down, or entice them with enough pressure that they knock it down themselves. Either way, that scenario is going to take a great deal of force for on maybe their end to provide, or someone else's end to provide. But all in all, like 100% agree with the sustainability. Like, what is sustainable, right? What in this very moment does knocking down the dam allow them to live a fuller life and impress upon those around them for years to come, in exchange for that one moment of bulldozing? In those moments, I'm like, yeah, actually, I can see, if you weigh the pros and cons against each other, it's a net positive. So I think it is just long term, like how many years to come is this person going to be benefited from what you decide now? If you're going to hurt them long term, right, by providing such a bad response, honestly, which I think TE DOMs are especially prone to do, that's not sustainable. That's not a long term commitment to that person. And I think that happens a lot with TE DOMs, especially because they might see that person actually as the rock. They're not seeing that person as like as an individual in that moment. It's really important to see that person as like, no, they're here, right? Like they need to learn things themselves, and like give them the grace, give them the opportunity to do so, because that's what's going to be beneficial to them. I think like my advice for other TE DOMs out there is, do not view the person as a rock. View them as having rocks, blocking their own path, but don't view them as the rock, because that's where we can really get not help, not be helpful. So
Yeah, I think the reason why NFJs are less likely to bulldoze, well, it's one, we're Enneagram nines, but it's also we're so aware of the trust that the person has for us that we almost want to honor it and live up to the trust that they're giving us, and we don't want to misuse it in any way, because we know that that trust is influence power, and that they're malleable still when they trust us. And so it's almost like it's the first thing that we protect, which is why bulldozing is one of the afterthoughts.
Last, yeah.
It's more of a
Yeah.
last measure if those don't work.
Yeah.
But it could be some people actually prefer the bulldozing because they will respect you more for not putting up
Right,
with their
right.
bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's really
Yeah,
a
I
case
and
by case kind of thing.
exactly that, Joyce. Exactly that. I was like, "Well, actually, you know what? Like, on a broad level, like, we're trying to agree on this, like, okay, what's the best approach?" But then it still comes down to the case by case basis with the individual, you know?
Yeah, and I'm processing in real time what the different types of shame would probably like be in that way. And yeah, everything is like case by case because I was trying to like think of, like brainstorm, I guess, like scenarios where it's like would shame again like be necessary? Like, because I very vehemently believe that like shame is there's not a place for it. But like what you at least said, about like people who are at the top and everything like that, um, and how they like need to like, you know, I guess like feel like, oh man, I was like trying to think of that situation. And I guess one of the things that did come to mind is like, even when it comes to like uh there's a song that Kendrick Lamar did. And at the end, like there's like a little skit, and
Mm.
it was like these gang members that like they were like kind of like shooting and like fighting and all of that. And then Maya Angelou pops in and she's like, I know that's not what I think it is. I know that's not what I think it is. Why are you so angry? And you can just see that these like thuggish gang members who were just acting all tough before, they all of a sudden were like putting their heads down like, dang, yeah, Maya Angelou is right. Like, maybe this is really dumb, and she didn't say it, but I could see her being like, you all should be ashamed of yourselves,
Right.
killing an innocent man like this in cold blood and boom, boom, boom.
I
Like,
love the voice,
yeah,
Denzel.
like, like that's like something that could really be like, oh, and I
Eh,
am prone to do that, like if there's like a sense of like urgency. But yeah, I guess like when I was like thinking of shame, I was mainly thinking of like if somebody just voices an opinion of theirs, then it's like, oh my gosh, like, that's like kind of disgusting. Like, no, that is wrong.
Like
Like,
a very
how could you
vitriolic
possibly be, yeah, like, how could you
reaction, yeah.
be pro-life or pro-choice or whatever? Like,
It's not conducive to discussion for one. It's
yeah,
that
exactly.
reaction, like, pulling that card out, it shuts people down.
Right.
That's not even fun, you know? Like,
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
a good debate, but
yeah.
that's not even fun. It's like, what is there to talk about?
Yeah, I'm
How
just not even
disgusted
gonna
you
talk to
are?
you, period.
I
Like, I'm just
agree.
gonna be like, okay, yeah, you disagree that I think this, and not only that you disagree, but like you vehemently disagree, and you're looking down on me, and you're calling me disgusting and all this stuff. Yeah, you know what? Forget
Yeah.
it. I'm just not gonna talk about this,
Yeah.
But yeah, in the situation where it's like you should all be ashamed of yourselves because like you went and you stole from the store or whatever like that. That is effective. And maybe long term, like those people, they'll feel bad. Like, dang, yeah, no, we did do wrong. We shouldn't have done that. But
Ooh.
then also at the same time, the thing that I was talking about is like, you could still sit down with the person and be like, what good came from this? Like, and it's almost like the same thing, and you're helping them like understand, like, son, you went out and you stole from the store and this is that, and they might still feel shame just from you telling them what they did, but
I see,
you're
yeah,
still
yeah.
showing like patience, and then they'll come to their own conclusion. They're like, no, dad, you're right, this is wrong. It's like, yeah, I'm glad that you were able to like see that, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
yeah, but it's
Yeah,
all
there's
stuff I'm still like processing. Yeah.
yeah, there's almost like shame that shuts down your brain and you can't think as well, and there's sometimes shame that can help you think more about the situation and
Mhm.
reflect more on your actions. Like, you can think about the people who invented the atomic bomb. There's actually a movie done on it, and there is that moment of shame. They realized that the atomic bomb was used to bomb, Japan, and hundreds of thousands of people died.
Yeah.
And I think what separates positive shame from negative shame is, like, they did feel shameful at that moment for doing it, and it caused them to, like, the creator of the atomic bomb actually went on protest against the own thing that he created. And so it can inspire action.
Yeah.
As long as, like, shame that's isolated to a moment rather than it lingers with you for a lifetime, or like
Yeah.
lingering shame is harmful because it's irrationally carried because you're not taking the lesson learned from it and you're just holding on to this emotion.
Yeah.
That's a
Agreed.
burden on you.
Yeah.
It's almost
most
like we
definitely.
all carry shame within ourselves, right? Like
Mhm.
there, it's almost like an adrenal gland, right? That like in some instances you will produce your own feeling of shame in
Mhm.
response to something else, versus what Denzel was, the example you were giving of that person, like, oh, like, how disgusting, you shouldn't be doing this. You're giving
Right.
shame
Yeah.
to someone else instead of it like necessarily coming from them, from
Yeah.
the inherent shame. So it's almost like inherent shame is like more impressionable because it comes from you. But shame then still exists because
Mhm.
it's shame created by yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 For sure. For
yeah.
Yeah.
sure.
And
Yeah.
this is a great topic to leave off on to discuss in our next episode of the Knife Show. And so thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope that you guys got something out of it. And until next time,
Stay
stay sharp.
sharp.
また夜が